This tutorial is for 4th grade, Module 1, Lesson 3. In Module 1, we will be studying place value as well as addition and subtraction. In Lesson 3, we'll first start by looking at the different sections on the place value chart and the fact that each section is separated by commas. So all the way to the right, I have my ones section, which includes the hundreds, tens, and ones. And then I have my thousands section, which includes hundred thousands, 10,000s, and thousands. And then I have my millions, which includes 100 millions, 10 millions, and millions. And you'll notice when we write these large numbers, each section is separated by a comma. That means if I were to start at the right side of my number, every time I move over 3 spaces, I need to add a comma. So we'll start this lesson by reviewing that concept. We have a list of numbers in the first section, and we need to write them with the commas in the correct place. I'll start the first problem by rewriting the numbers as they are. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then if I start from the right, I need to count over 3 places, and that's where my comma goes. Going across, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A comma would go between the 2 and the 3. The number is 12,345. In problem C, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The comma would go between the 3 and 4. I would read this number as 123,456. In problem D, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I would put a comma between the 4 and the 5 and a comma between the 2 and the 1. I would read this number as 1,234,567. And finally, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1. My first comma will go between the 8 and the 9, and then between the 5 and the 6, and between the 2 and the 3. This number would be read as 12,345,678,901. So each time I hit one of those commas when I'm saying the number, I say the section that those numbers appear in. And if you'll notice, I do not use the word and when I'm reading these numbers. I would not say 1,234 for that first number. When we're reading and saying numbers, the only time we're going to use and is if we're working with decimals and decimal points or with mixed number fractions. So we want to get out of the habit of saying and when we're reading these types of numbers, so the students don't get confused later on when we look at different types of numbers. In the next section, we're looking at numbers first written as expressions. By expressions, we mean we have 2 different parts of the numbers separated by a plus sign. We need to write these numbers in standard form, which means writing them using regular digits. If I have 5 tens plus 5 tens, that would be the same thing as 50 plus 50, since 5 tens is equal to 50. So the standard form of this number would be 100, 50 plus 50. 300s plus 700s would give me 10 hundreds, or 300 plus 700 would give me 1,000, which is the same thing as 10 hundreds. So the standard form is 1,000. The next problem, I have 400 thousands and 600 thousands. Well, 400 plus 600 equals 1,000 thousands. So to write 1,000 thousands, I would write my 1,000, and if I were to multiply this by 1,000 again, it would get 1,000 times as large. So 400 thousands plus 600 thousands is 1,000 thousands, or 1 million. In And finally, I have 8 thousandths and 4 thousandths. Well, since 8 plus 4 equals 12, my answer would be 12 thousandths. So I would have a 12 in the thousands section. 8 thousandths plus 4 thousandths is 12,000. In this section, we're given another expression, and we need to evaluate it and show how we come up with our final answer by using the place value chart. So I'm going to start with 4 thousandths on the place value chart. That just means I'm going to put 4 place value discs in the thousands section. That shows 4 thousandths. Now I'm going to add 11 hundredths to the place value chart as well. So if I move over into the hundreds section, I'll draw 11 place value discs there. I'm going to draw them in groups of 5 because it makes it easier for me to see how many discs I actually have without having to count all of them. Now, the standard rule is if you get 10 or more discs in any place value, you would compose them and change them to the next place value greater. Here's what I mean by this. Here we have 11 hundredths. I'm going to take 10 of those hundreds and compose them into 1,000 because 10 hundredths is the same thing as 1,000. I'm going to cross those out after I compose them and move them over so I don't get confused by those. Now, if you look in all, we have 5,100 in standard form. 5 discs are in the thousands section, 1 disc is in the hundreds section. I don't have any in my tens or my ones. So this place value chart is showing us the number 5,100. Let's look at another example. This time I'm going to start by drawing 24 10,000ths. So I start in my 10,000ths section and I'll draw 24 place value discs. So that would be 2 groups of 10 and a group of 4. Next, I need to draw my 11 thousandths. So I move to the thousands section and I'll draw 11 discs. Now let's look to see what kind of composing we can do. Again, if I have 10 or more discs in any place value, I can compose them into one group and move them to the next place value section. If I have 10 discs that are 10 thousandths each, I can compose that into a 100,000 disc. So I'm going to move that over. I can do the same thing with this other group of 10 thousandths. I can compose it into a 100,000 disc and move that over. That leaves me with 4 10,000ths or 40,000 here. I can do the same thing in my thousands section. I'll take these 10 and compose them into a group of 10,000. I'll move that down here. And that shows all the composing that we can do with this number. Now let's write the number in standard form. I have 2 discs in the 100,000ths section, so I'll start there. I have 5 discs in the 10,000 section. I have 1 disc in the thousands section. I have no discs in the hundreds, tens, or ones section. The standard form of the number then is 251,000, and you can see how the place value discs match the standard form. We can use a similar process when multiplying on the place value chart. I'm starting off with the problem 10 times 3 thousandths. So I'm going to draw my 3 thousandths first. So I have 3 discs in my thousands place. I'm going to multiply those 3 discs each by 10. So I take my first disc, if I multiply it by 10, it becomes 10 times greater. So that first disc, which was 1,000, has become 10 times greater because I multiplied it by 10. I'll do the same thing for the remaining 2 discs. So once I take that original group of 3 and multiply each by 10, I now have 30 thousandths. But let's compose these and change them into 10 thousandths. I can take this group of 10 and turn it into a 10,000. I can take the next group of 10 and do the same thing. turn that into 10,000. And finally, I can take that last group of 10 and turn it into a 10,000. That means in all I have 3 disks. Each disk is in the 10,000s place, which again makes 30,000. So if I have a 3 in my 10,000s place, I composed all of those disks, so those are gone. So I have 0 in my thousands place, I have 0 in the hundreds place, 0 in the tens place, and 0 in the ones place. That means 10 times 3,000 is equal to 30,000. Now, how many thousands are in the answer? Well, that's what we got in that place value. We started with 30 thousands before we composed them and changed them to 10,000s. So in all, we have 30 thousands. Here's another example. This time I'm starting with 3 10,000s and 2 thousands. I'm going to multiply those by 10. So I'll draw my 3 10,000s. Here's the 3. And my 2 thousands. Now let's multiply those by 10 the same way we did in the previous problem. I'll take the first disk and make it 10 times greater. And I'll do the same thing for the remaining 2 disks in my 10,000s place. And now I'm going to move to my thousands section and I'll make each of those disks 10 times greater. Now let's compose our groups of 10. So I have 10 disks that are 10,000 each. That's the same thing as 100,000. I have another group of 10 10,000s and I can compose that into 100,000. And I have one more group that I can compose into 100,000. So I've composed all of those. Let's do the same thing with our thousands. If I take my group of 10 thousands, I can compose that into a 10,000 disk. Do the same with this group. I have 10 thousands disks and I can compose those into a group of 10,000. Now let's write our number. I'll start in the 100,000 section. I have 3 of those disks. In the 10,000 section, I have 2 of those disks. In the 1,000 section, I composed all of those disks and moved them over, so those are gone, which means I now have 0 in my thousands section, 0 in my hundreds, 0 in the tens, and 0 in the ones. Now the question is, how many thousands are in my answer? That means in this whole number, how many thousands would it take to create this number? Well, if I read this number, I read it as 320,000. That simply means there are 320 thousands in the number. So how many thousands are in my answer? 320. Let's look at one more example. This time we're going to start with 32 thousands, 100, and 4 ones. We're going to multiply that by 10. I'll start by drawing my 32 thousands. So I'm in my thousands section and I need 32 of those. But if I think about this, 32 thousands would mean that I have 3 groups of 10,000 and 2 thousands. So I'm going to start my place value chart showing it that way. I have 3 groups of 10,000 and 2 groups of 1,000. That gives me my 32 thousands altogether. Now let's draw the 100. 1 disk in my hundreds place and 4 ones. 4 disks in my ones place. And I'm going to multiply each of those by 10. Follow the same process. Start with my 10,000 disks and grow them to be 10 times as large. I'll do the same thing for my thousands and my hundreds and finally my ones. Now I can compose my disks into groups of 10 and move them to the next greatest place value. I'm going to start with my ones this time. So I started with 4 ones. I took each of those and multiplied those by 10, made them 10 times as great. Now I can compose one group of 10 and move it into my tens place. Here's another group of 10 ones. move that over. Another group, move that over. And my last group of 10 ones, I can move that over. So each of those now became a 10, so I have 4 tens, or 40. Those are gone. Do the same thing with my hundreds. I have 10 hundreds, which is the same thing as 1,000. So I compose those. And in my thousands place, I have 10 thousands, which is the same thing as a group of 10,000. Do the same thing. I have 10 thousands. Compose that into a 10,000 disk. And I'll do the same thing in my 10,000s section. I have 10 groups of 10,000, which is the same thing as 100,000. I now have another group of 10 10,000s. Compose those into 100,000. And my last group of 10 10,000s, which is 100,000. So I've done all of my composing and moved everything over. Now let's write the number shown by our place value disks. I have 3 100,000s. I have 2 10,000s. I have 1,000. I have 0 hundreds. Those all got moved over. I have 4 tens, and I have 0 ones. That means that 32 thousands plus 100 plus 4 ones times 10 equals 321,040. And again, the question asking how many thousands are in your answer? Well, we said we had 321 thousands. So that's how many thousands are in my answer, 321.